In the labyrinthine streets of a city that never slept, a young man with a quiet disposition and sharp, observant eyes worked as a restorer of antique books. His small shop was a sanctuary of hushed reverence, filled with the scent of aged paper and leather. He was a master of his craft, his hands moving with the precision of a surgeon as he mended torn pages, rebound crumbling spines, and deciphered the faded secrets within. He lived in a world of forgotten histories and silent whispers, a world where the past was a puzzle to be meticulously solved. Across town, high above the bustling streets in a sleek, minimalist apartment, a young woman with a tumble of vibrant red hair worked as a digital cryptographer. Her world was a universe of algorithms and encrypted data, a silent battle of wits against the unseen forces of the internet. Her mind was a fortress of logic and pattern recognition, her fingers a blur on the keyboard as she unraveled complex codes and protected secrets from the shadows. She lived in a world of pure information and digital ghosts, a world where the future was a puzzle to be ingeniously built. Their lives were separated by a vast, unbridgeable divide of time and technology. He was a guardian of the past, his work a quiet act of preservation. She was a century of the future, her work a constant act of defense. He found solace in the tangible weight of a book in his hands, in the quiet, undeniable proof of its existence. She found joy in the ephemeral nature of her work, in the clean, silent victory of a code unbreakable. The city, with its restless energy, was the backdrop for their separate realities. One evening, a mysterious package arrived at his shop. There was no name, no address, just a single tarnished key taped to a plain brown box. Inside the box was an old leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and brittle. The book was a strange mix of handwritten prose and intricate coded ciphers. He had never seen anything like it. His instincts as a restorer told him to be careful. The book felt as if it held a deep, forgotten secret. A silent, unsettling hum seemed to emanate from its very pages. Days later, the cryptographer received a series of fragmented, encrypted data packets. They were sent from a source she couldn't trace, a digital ghost that left no footprint. The data was a strange mix of historical facts and what looked like an intricate numerical code. She had a strange, unsettling feeling as she began to work. The data felt as if it held a deep, forgotten secret. It was a puzzle that felt both ancient and modern, and it pulled her in with a magnetic, dangerous force. She began to spend her nights trying to decipher the code. It was a different kind of challenge, one that didn't fit into her usual patterns. The code was not logical, it was almost poetic. She began to see the numbers not as ciphers, but as a kind of language, a series of phrases that seemed to be leading her somewhere. The more she worked, the more the data seemed to be hinting at a physical location, an old, forgotten library. Meanwhile, the restorer was working his way through the mysterious book. He was able to mend the pages, but the coded ciphers remained a mystery. He had spent years studying ancient languages and symbols, but these were different. They seemed to move on the page, almost alive. He had an unsettling feeling as he worked, as if the book was a living thing, a silent guardian of a forgotten past. The prose in the book, when he translated it, was a strange, haunting story of a secret society, a group of guardians sworn to protect a great mystery. The story spoke of a key that would unlock a hidden treasure. And as he read, he realized the story was leading him to a physical location, a quiet, unassuming antique shop. A week later, she found herself standing before a small, dimly lit shop, its windows filled with forgotten relics. Her heart pounded in her chest. It was the address from her code. She saw a small sign on the door, Arsado Book Restorations. She entered the shop, the small, tarnished key heavy in her hand. At the same time, he found himself standing before a small, nondescript building. It was the address from his book. He saw a small plaque on the door, Miyamoto Digital Cryptography. The door was slightly ajar, and he could see the soft blue glow of a computer screen. His heart pounded in his chest. He entered the building, a mysterious book heavy in his hands. They found each other in the middle of a bustling intersection. She having left the bookshop, and he having left the cryptography studio, their paths, which had been so far apart, had finally converged. They stopped, their eyes meeting across the chaotic street. He saw the woman from the photograph he had found tucked inside the book, the one who was meant to decipher the code. She saw the man from the digital blueprint he had found in her data, the one who was meant to restore the book. Their eyes widened in recognition, a silent understanding passing between them. He held out the book, its pages glowing faintly in the streetlights. She held out the key, its tarnished metal catching the light. He looked at the book, then at her, and then a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, a silent question in his eyes. He gestured for her to follow him. He led her back to his shop, the small key now in her hand. She stepped into a sanctuary, the scent of old paper and leather filling her senses. She placed the key on his workbench. He carefully took the book from her hands and placed it on the table. With a silent nod, he turned to a small, hidden panel in the wall. The panel clicked open, revealing a small, locked compartment. She carefully inserted the key. It fit perfectly, a quiet, perfect click. The compartment opened, revealing a single small scroll. He carefully unrolled it. It was a map, a beautiful, hand-drawn star chart, its constellations and nebulae rendered in stunning detail. But it was more than just a map. It was a cipher. She immediately understood. The constellations were a complex algorithm, a key to a greater mystery. She smiled, a silent response to his creation. She moved to his side, and with a single, elegant motion of her finger, she projected a small, beautiful hologram of a perfect, blooming cherry blossom over the map, a finishing touch to his silent masterpiece. He watched her, a quiet understanding passing between them, a world of unspoken words in a single shared moment. He looked at her, at the quiet, powerful beauty of her mind, and he knew that their paths, though different, were forever intertwined. Morning in a quiet coastal town began with the soft whisper of the tides. In a small, salt-scented workshop filled with the intricate, clicking sounds of clockwork, a young woman with hair the color of dawn mist sat at a cluttered workbench. She was a horologist, her hands a blur of delicate motion as she assembled the minuscule gears of a pocket watch. Her world was a universe of time, of perfect, unwavering rhythm and silent, beautiful movement. She found solace in the precision of her craft, in the way each piece, no matter how small, had a purpose and a place in the larger whole. Across the town, where the sand met the sea, a young man moved with the confident grace of the waves. He was a sand sculptor, his hands, strong and tanned, shaping the wet grains into colossal temporary art. His world was a realm of impermanence and boundless creativity, a place where magnificent castles and mythical beasts could rise from the earth in a single day, only to be washed away by the next tide. He found joy in the transient nature of his work, and the freedom of knowing that each creation, beautiful as it was a fleeting moment in time. Their lives were separated by more than just the town square. They existed in different temporal dimensions. She lived in a world of measured, meticulous time, her work a constant negotiation with the past and a hope for the future. He lived in a world of now, his work a joyful celebration of the present moment, a beautiful, powerful acknowledgement of its fleeting nature. She spent her days surrounded by the gentle ticking of clocks, the quiet beat of 1,000 tiny hearts. He spent his days with the sun on his face and the constant roar of the ocean in his ears. One late afternoon, as a storm began to brew on the horizon, he was putting the finishing touches on a massive, intricate sculpture of a sea serpent. A sudden, violent gust of wind whipped a handful of sand into his eyes. He recoiled, his hands instinctively wiping away the grit. When he opened them, he saw that the wind had taken a small but crucial part of his sea serpent's tail, leaving a jagged, broken line in its place. He knew the next tide would claim the rest. A silent sigh of resignation escaped him as he watched the first drops of rain begin to fall. Days later, the horologist was walking along the shore, a rare moment of respite from her work. She noticed a strange, smooth object half buried in the sand. Curious, she knelt and dug it out. It was a beautiful, small piece of driftwood, but she saw that someone had carved something into its surface. It was a beautiful, elegant line, the gentle curve of a sea serpent's tail, but its end was jagged and broken. She felt a strange pull, a sense of familiarity she couldn't explain. She carefully tucked the driftwood into her pocket, a small piece of a foreign world she now held. She returned to her workshop, the piece of driftwood a quiet weight in her hand. She began to think about the broken line. It was an unfinished story, a beautiful design that had been interrupted. She found herself trying to translate the feelings the broken piece evoked into her art. She began a new project. A series of delicate pocket watches, but she intentionally left a small, beautiful imperfection in each one, a minute hand that was slightly too long, a gear with a barely there chip. She found that these small flaws gave her perfect creations a kind of life they had lacked before. Meanwhile, the sand sculptor was still haunted by the memory of his ruined sea serpent. He tried to replicate its fluid, powerful lines in his next creation, but his work felt stiff and lifeless. He couldn't recapture the quiet elegance of the original. He walked through the town, his mind a whirlwind of frustration, and found himself drawn to a small, dusty clock shop he'd never paid attention to before. His eyes fell upon a series of pocket watches displayed in the window. The watches were stunning, each one a masterpiece of precision and beauty. But then he saw it. A small, elegant watch, its face a clean, simple design, but its minute hand was slightly too long, overlapping the hour hand just so. He moved closer, a sense of recognition flooding him. It was his broken sea serpent, his moment of chaos, now transformed into a part of her silent universe. He saw his own power, his own thoughtlessness, reflected back at him through her silent craft. A small sign beside the watches read, "Why, Tanaka." He left the shop with a newfound purpose. He returned to the beach. The image of her watches burned into his mind. He no longer tried to fight the unpredictable nature of the sand. Instead, he embraced it, allowing the ebb and flow of the tides to guide him. He began a new sculpture, a series of beautiful, ethereal creations that were not of perfect, elegant lines, but of fractured, fragmented forms, their beauty and their impermanence. The result was a stunning triumph. The shattered lines gave the sculptures a raw, powerful beauty they had lacked before. A week later, she found herself walking by the shore. In the center of the beach, bathed in the soft afternoon light, a single figure was working on a sand sculpture. Her heart seemed to stop. It was a beautiful, fragmented sculpture, its forms elegant and powerful. It was a silent tribute to her work, a beautiful, fleeting masterpiece. The style, the quiet reverence for her work, was the same hand that had created the broken driftwood she carried in her pocket. A small card beside the sculpture read, "Arsado." She entered the beach, her heart pounding in her chest. She stood at the edge of his sculpture, a small, beautiful pocket watch in her hands. The sand sculptor, sensing her presence, stopped his movements and turned to face her, his brow furrowed in a quiet question. Their eyes met. He saw the woman from the clock shop, the one who healed his silent memories with her quiet care. She saw the man who had created the beautiful, elegant sculpture she had seen on the beach, the one who saw the world with the same quiet awe as she did. She held out the small, delicate pocket watch. His eyes widened in recognition. He took the watch from her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. He looked at the watch, then at her, and then a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, a silent question in his eyes. He gestured for her to follow him. He led her to a quiet, sheltered corner of the beach, a small area where the sand was still wet. He carefully placed the watch in the sand, and with a single, elegant motion of his hand, he traced a small, perfect circle around it, a silent tribute to her art. She smiled, a silent response to his creation. She moved to his side, and with a gentle touch, she carefully adjusted the minute hand on the watch, setting it to the exact moment the sun would set, a finishing touch to his silent masterpiece. He watched her, a quiet understanding passing between them, a world of unspoken words in a single shared moment. Rain fell in sheets over Tokyo, a constant gray veil blurring the neon cityscape. In a small second-story apartment, a young woman with a tumble of auburn hair sat at a worn wooden desk. She held a paintbrush, her hand steady as she dipped it into a pot of thick indigo paint. On the canvas before her, a swirling, star-filled nebula was taking shape. Each stroke was deliberate, a silent conversation between her and the cosmic void she was creating. This was her world, a universe of quiet colors and imagined constellations. On the other side of town, in a workshop filled with the scent of sawdust and the low hum of machinery, a young man with calloused hands worked on a sculpture. His dark hair was tied back with a simple band, and his brow was furrowed in concentration. He was sanding a block of cherry wood, revealing the smooth, flowing lines of a crane in flight. The bird's wings, delicate and precise, were carved from his own memories, a moment of silent awe from a trip to the countryside years ago. He moved with a practiced grace, each motion a testament to the hours of effort he poured into his craft. Their lives were separated by a distance measured in train lines and silent streets. She spent her days surrounded by her art, a solitary figure in a world she painted herself. Her meals were simple, her music always instrumental, and her thoughts were often lost in the abstract beauty of her work. He, on the other hand, was always in motion, his body an extension of the tools he used. He'd stop for a late-night bowl of ramen, the steam warming his face, and find inspiration in the intricate patterns of a stranger's tattoo or the elegant curve of a teacup. The city, with its relentless energy, was the backdrop for their separate realities. One evening, he was sketching in a small park, the streetlights illuminating the page, when a sudden gust of wind scattered his drawings. He scrambled to collect them, his hands fumbling in the dim light. A small drawing of a cherry blossom branch, half finished and smudged, slipped away and landed under a park bench. He didn't notice it was missing, his focus on gathering the rest of his work before another gust carried them away. Days later, the auburn-haired artist was walking through that same park, seeking a quiet corner to clear her mind. She noticed a crumpled piece of paper peeking out from under a bench. Curious, she knelt down and retrieved it. As she unfolded the paper, her eyes widened. It was a beautiful, unfinished sketch of a cherry blossom. The lines were so sure, so full of potential. She turned it over, hoping to find a name or a signature, but there was nothing. A faint smile touched her lips as she carefully tucked the drawing into her sketchbook, a small piece of mystery she now carried with her. She found herself thinking about the sketch more and more. Who made it? What was their story? The drawing became a source of quiet inspiration for her. She found herself trying to capture the same feeling in her own work, a balance of strength and fragility. She created a new series of paintings, each one a tribute to the unknown artist. Her paintings, usually cosmic and abstract, began to incorporate more organic shapes, more grounded elements. A star field would have a single, delicate flower floating in the center. A nebula would swirl around the sharp, graceful form of a bird. Meanwhile, the sculptor was struggling with a new piece. He was trying to create a sculpture that felt light and ethereal, something that could almost float on air. He carved and chiseled, but something was missing. The shapes felt heavy, anchored to the earth. He walked through the city, his mind a whirlwind of frustration, looking for something to spark his creativity. He found himself drawn to a small art gallery he'd never noticed before. He stepped inside, the air cool and silent after the noisy street. His eyes fell upon a canvas on the far wall. It was a painting of a swirling deep blue nebula, but within the celestial chaos, a perfect, detailed crane was soaring, its wings outstretched as if it were carved from light. He stood transfixed, a sense of recognition flooding him. It was his bird, his quiet memory, now transformed into a part of a painted universe. He moved from painting to painting, each one a different combination of the cosmic and the natural. He saw a field of wildflowers floating amongst distant galaxies, a single cherry blossom branch emerging from a shimmering star cluster. He saw his own work, his own feelings, reflected back at him through her silent strokes. A single name was written on the placard beside each painting. At Tanaka, he left the gallery with a newfound purpose. He returned to his workshop. The image of her paintings burned into his mind. He no longer tried to fight the weight of his materials. Instead, he embraced it, allowing the solid wood to become an anchor for the lightness he was trying to achieve. He began a new sculpture, a series of cherry blossom branches carved from heavy walnut, their blossoms and leaves made of thin, almost transparent, layers of polished steel. The contrast was stunning. The weight of the wood gave the delicate steel a grounded strength it had lacked before. A week later, she found herself walking by a small artisan shop. In the window, bathed in the afternoon sun, was a beautiful sculpture. Her heart seemed to stop. It was a series of cherry blossom branches, each one a perfect, intricate carving. The blossoms themselves were made of gleaming metal, catching the light like liquid silver, but it was the style that caught her breath. The lines, the balance, the quiet strength. It was the same hand that had created the sketch she carried in her sketchbook. A small card beside the sculpture read, Kaharu. She entered the shop, her hand on the drawing she kept safe in her pocket. The shopkeeper, a kind elderly woman, was arranging a display of teacups. The artist pointed to the sculpture in the window. The shopkeeper smiled. The artist found herself drawing out the crumpled piece of paper, her fingers trembling slightly. The shopkeeper's eyes crinkled in understanding. She handed the artist a small, simple business card. The name on the card was Keiharu. The address on the card led her to a quiet residential street. She stood before a small two-story house with a workshop attached to the back. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had a sudden, overwhelming urge to run away. What if she was wrong? What if he was nothing like she imagined? She took a deep breath and knocked on the door. The door opened, and the sculptor stood there, his hands smudged with sawdust, his brow furrowed in a quiet question. Their eyes met. He saw the woman from the gallery, the one who painted his silent memories. She saw the man who had created the sketch she had found in the park, the one who saw the world with the same quiet awe as she did. She held out the crumpled sketch. His eyes widened in recognition. He took the drawing from her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. He looked at the sketch, then at her, and then a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, a silent question in his eyes. He stepped back and gestured for her to enter. She stepped into the workshop, the smell of wood and dust filling the air. On his workbench sat a finished sculpture. It was a star cluster, each star a delicate, polished piece of wood. But in the center, a single perfect cherry blossom made of a shimmering, silvery metal bloomed. It was a painting, now made real, a testament to a connection neither of them had known existed. She smiled, a silent response to his creation. She moved to his workbench and carefully took a small tube of cobalt blue paint from her bag. She squeezed a tiny dot of it onto a wooden palette, and with her finger, she gently swirled a single, elegant line through the air above his sculpture, her own finishing touch to his silent masterpiece. He watched her, a quiet understanding passing between them, a world of unspoken words in a single shared moment. Morning sunlight filtered through the delicate leaves of a massive cherry blossom tree, painted the schoolyard in dappled patterns of light and shadow. In the center of the field, a young man with a wild shock of spiky black hair moved with explosive energy. He was a master of martial arts, a silent storm of practiced movements and controlled power. His body was a testament to years of dedication, each kick and block a silent story of discipline and strength. He found solace in the physicality of his training, in the quiet focus it demanded, and in the raw honesty of his own power. Across the campus, in the silent, sun-drenched greenhouse, a young woman with a long braid, the color of wheat, knelt among her plants. She was a botanist, her fingers stained with soil, moving with gentle care as she tended to her rare orchids. Her world was one of quiet growth and delicate life, a universe of silent, patient beauty. She found joy in the subtle changes of her plants, in the way a single bud could hold the promise of a breathtaking bloom. She saw the world not in terms of strength, but in terms of quiet resilience and nurturing. Their lives were separated by more than just a school building. They were separated by an understanding of the world. He lived in a realm of action and reaction, a world where the fastest punch and the quickest mind won. She lived in a realm of slow, deliberate growth, a world where patience and care were the keys to success. He spent his days in the loud, open spaces of the training grounds, his only companions the soft thud of his feet on the mat and the rush of air around his movements. She spent her days in the quiet, humid air of the greenhouse, her only companions the rustle of leaves and the scent of damp earth. One afternoon, as he was practicing a particularly difficult form, a sudden, powerful kick went astray. His foot clipped a small, stray pebble, sending it flying across the schoolyard with a speed and force that even he couldn't have predicted. The pebble soared through the air, a small, dark projectile, before disappearing into the open door of the greenhouse. Days later, the botanist was carefully misting a rare, delicate orchid. A small, dark mark on one of its petals caught her eye. She leaned closer, her brow furrowed in concern. It was a tiny tear, a small, violent wound on the otherwise perfect petal. She was meticulous in her care, and she couldn't understand what had caused it. She felt a strange ache of sadness for the beautiful, injured flower. She gently wrapped a small white bandage around the torn petal, a quiet act of healing for the beautiful plant. She began to think about the small, violent tear more and more. Who had caused it? She imagined a careless student, a rough game, a moment of thoughtlessness. She found herself trying to translate the feelings the injured plant evoked into her work. She began a new project, a series of photographs of her plants, but she intentionally captured their flaws and their struggles, a wilted leaf here, a bent stem there. She found that these images, though not perfect, held a deeper, more profound kind of beauty. Meanwhile, the martial artist was still bothered by his errant kick. He had never lost control like that before, and the knowledge that his power, unchanneled, could cause harm was a heavy weight on his conscience. He had a sudden, overwhelming need to understand the effect of his actions. He walked across the campus, his mind a whirlwind of frustration, and found himself drawn to the quiet, peaceful greenhouse he'd never paid attention to before. His eyes fell upon a series of photographs on a far wall. The images were a strange mix of the beautiful and the imperfect, each plant a silent testament to a struggle. He saw images of a vine reaching desperately for the sun, a flower with a bent stem, a small, young sprout struggling to break through the soil. But then he saw it, a beautiful, elegant orchid, a perfect flower, with a small white bandage wrapped around one of its petals. He froze, a sense of recognition flooding him. It was his kick, his moment of carelessness, now transformed into a part of her silent universe. He saw his own power, his own thoughtlessness, reflected back at him through her silent lens. A small sign beside the artwork read, Sato, he left the greenhouse with a newfound purpose. He returned to his training grounds, the image of her photographs burned into his mind. He no longer tried to fight the unpredictable nature of his power. Instead, he embraced it, allowing the flow of his energy to guide him. He began a new form, a series of movements that were not about strength and speed, but about control and gentle power. The result was a stunning triumph. The form was a beautiful, elegant dance, a perfect balance of power and restraint. A week later, she found herself walking by the school's training grounds. In the center of the field, bathed in the soft afternoon light, a single figure moved with a quiet, graceful energy. Her heart seemed to stop. It was a beautiful, elegant form, not a show of power, but a show of perfect control. His movements were a fluid, beautiful dance, a silent tribute to her plants. The style, the quiet reverence for her work, was the same hand that had created the beautiful, quiet images she had seen. A small card beside the field read, R. Tanaka. She entered the training grounds, her heart pounding in her chest. She stood at the edge of the mat, a small, beautifully potted orchid in her hands. The martial artist, sensing her presence, stopped his movements and turned to face her, his brow furrowed in a quiet question. Their eyes met. He saw the woman from the greenhouse, the one who healed his silent memories with her quiet care. She saw the man who had created the beautiful, elegant form she had seen in the training grounds, the one who saw the world with the same quiet awe as she did. She held out the small potted orchid. His eyes widened in recognition. He took the orchid from her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. He looked at the orchid, then at her, and then a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, a silent question in his eyes. He gestured for her to follow him. He led her to a quiet, sheltered corner of the field, a small area where a single tree grew. He carefully placed the orchid in the soil, a small, quiet act of planting. She smiled, a silent response to his creation. She moved to his side and, with a single, elegant motion of her hand, she gently traced a small, beautiful symbol of her own invention in the air, a finishing touch to his silent masterpiece. He watched her, a quiet understanding passing between them, a world of unspoken words in a single shared moment. Golden hours spilled over the bustling port city, bathing the old docks in a warm, honeyed light. In the shadow of colossal cargo cranes, a young woman moved with the agile precision of a shipwright. Her hands, smudged with grease and streaked with paint, were busy mending a frayed rope on a fishing trawler. She was a quiet figure, her focus absolute, her world one of sea salt and weathered wood. The creak of rigging and the cry of gulls were her soundtrack. She found solace in the honest work of her hands, in the way she could feel the history of a vessel in its grain and rust. On the other side of the harbor, high above the chaotic noise, a young man sat in the silent cockpit of a drone. He was a drone pilot, his fingers dancing across a control panel as he guided his aerial camera through the sky. He was a master of perspective, able to capture the city from impossible angles, to frame the chaos below into a single breathtaking shot. His world was one of pixels and data, of a disembodied view from above. He found joy in the endless freedom of flight, in the way he could transform a mundane street scene into an artful masterpiece. Their lives were separated by a vast physical and philosophical distance. She lived with the weight of the physical world, her work grounded in gravity and tangible reality. He lived in the weightless world of the digital, his work a constant negotiation with the unseen forces of wind and signal. She spent her days with the sun on her face and the spray of the ocean in her hair. He spent his days in the cool, climate-controlled silence of his studio, his only companions the hum of his equipment and the glowing screens. One evening, as she was securing the last of her ropes, a sudden, fierce gust of wind tore across the harbor. The wind whipped her small canvas bag from her grasp, sending it tumbling toward the water. Inside the bag were her plans for a new boat, a detailed blueprint she had spent months perfecting. Her heart sank as the bag splashed into the dark, murky harbor, the paper inside now a ruined, soggy mess. Days later, the drone pilot was flying a routine survey of the harbor, his camera capturing the fading light on the water. His lens, a high-resolution, specialized piece of equipment, picked up a strange object floating near a dock. He moved his drone closer, the camera zooming in. It was a waterlogged canvas bag, its contents a smeared, unrecognizable pulp. Out of professional curiosity, he decided to retrieve it, guiding his drone with a precise, careful motion until its mechanical arm grasped the bag and lifted it from the water. He returned to his studio and placed the bag on his workbench. He pulled out the ruined contents, the smeared ink and warped paper. It was a blueprint, he realized, but entirely indecipherable. But something about the lines, the way they had been drawn with such care and precision, held his attention. He couldn't make out the details, but he could feel the passion behind them. He felt a strange pull, a sense of familiarity he couldn't explain. He carefully laid the blueprint out to dry, a small piece of a foreign world she now held. He began to think about the blueprint. The lines, though ruined, held a certain kind of beauty, a quiet, grounded beauty that was entirely different from the vast, open world he saw from above. He found himself trying to translate the feelings the blueprint evoked into his art. He began a new series of aerial shots, no longer trying to capture the grand, sweeping vistas of the city, but instead focusing on the small, intricate details of the harbor. He focused on the rust on a crane, the elegant curve of a ship's hull, the messy, tangled lines of a rope. Meanwhile, the shipwright was still struggling to recreate her lost blueprint. She tried to remember every detail, every precise measurement, but the memories were vague and frustratingly incomplete. She couldn't recapture the quiet elegance of the original. She walked through the city, her mind a whirlwind of frustration, and found herself drawn to a small, independent film festival she'd heard about. Her eyes fell upon a series of short films. The pieces were a strange mix of the abstract and mechanical, but one of them, a beautiful, mesmerizing film of the harbor, caught her breath. The camera moved with an impossible grace, a silent ice soaring above the docks. And in the film she saw it, a series of shots of her work, the rusted chain of an anchor, the worn wood of a deck, and in a few quick cuts her own hands, so familiar to her working on a ship. He had captured the very soul of her work, the quiet dedication she poured into every piece. A single name was written on the placard beside the film, Keiharo. She left the festival with a newfound purpose. She returned to her workshop. The image of his film burned into her mind. She no longer tried to fight the frustration of her lost blueprints. Instead, she embraced it. She began a new project, a series of small, intricate models of her boat, each one made from memory, slightly different, slightly imperfect. She knew that in her own way, she was recapturing the spirit of her work, not just the technical details. A week later, she found herself walking by a small, independent film studio. In the window, bathed in the soft glow of the monitor, a series of aerial photographs were displayed. Her heart seemed to stop. She saw it, a stunning, elegant photograph of her own fishing trawler, the one she had just finished, captured from a perfect angle she had never seen before. The colors, the light, the composition, it was a true masterpiece. The style, the quiet reverence for her work, was the same hand that had created the beautiful film she had seen. A small card beside the photographs read, Keiharo. She entered the studio, a strange mixture of excitement and nerves bubbling in her chest. The pilot looked up from his work, his brow furrowed in a quiet question. Their eyes met. He saw the woman from the film, the one who worked with a silent dedication he had only ever seen from above. She saw the man who had created the film she had seen in the festival, the one who saw the world with the same quiet awe as she did. She held out a small, beautiful hand-carved wooden model of her new boat, a perfect, intricate miniature. His eyes widened in recognition. He took the model from her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. He looked at the model, then at her, and then a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, a silent question in his eyes. He gestured for her to follow him to his workbench. He carefully placed the model on a small rotating platform, and with a precision born of 1,000 hours of practice, he began to project a series of holographic images from his drone's camera onto its surface, capturing the model from 100 different beautiful angles. He created a beautiful, living, three-dimensional film of her work, a testament to a connection neither of them had known existed. She smiled, a silent response to his creation. She moved to his side and, with a single, elegant motion of her finger, she gently adjusted the lighting on his holographic display, bringing out the rich, warm color of the model's wooden hull, a finishing touch to his silent masterpiece. He watched her, a quiet understanding passing between them, a world of unspoken words in a single shared moment. Evening in the bustling metropolis was a symphony of neon lights and the distant wail of sirens. In a cramped, cluttered apartment filled with stacks of old newspapers and film canisters, a young man with a tired but determined expression worked tirelessly. He was an independent investigative journalist, a silent sleuth who pieced together fragments of truth from the city's hidden corners. His world was a web of secrets, a place where hidden narratives lay buried beneath the surface. He found purpose in his solitary quest for justice, in the way a single photograph or a discarded document could expose a powerful lie. Across town, in the sterile, high-tech solitude of a corporate office, a young woman with a sharp, focused gaze worked as a corporate security analyst. Her world was a universe of data and digital footprints, a silent guardian of sensitive information. She was a master of her craft, her fingers a blur on the keyboard as she built firewalls and tracked malicious code. She found solace in the absolute logic of her work, in the way a single anomaly in a stream of data could signal a threat. Her world was a realm of cold, hard facts, a place where she had to trust no one. Their lives were separated by a vast philosophical and professional chasm. He was a seeker of truth, his work a quiet act of rebellion. She was a keeper of secrets, her work a constant act of defense. He spent his nights in the murky, uncertain world of informants and back alleys. She spent her nights in the clean, silent glow of her multiple monitors, the only sound the soft click of her keyboard. The city, with its relentless energy, was the backdrop for their separate realities. One evening, a mysterious, anonymous email landed in her secure inbox. The message was encrypted with a new, sophisticated cipher she had never encountered before. It was a strange mix of what looked like historical data and what seemed to be a series of coordinates. She had a strange, unsettling feeling as she began to work. The data felt as if it held a deep, forgotten secret. It was a puzzle that felt both ancient and modern, and it pulled her in with a magnetic, dangerous force. Days later, the journalist received a mysterious, unmarked film canister. Inside was a single, old-fashioned photographic negative. When he developed it in his darkroom, the image that emerged was strange and haunting. It was a photograph of a building long since demolished, but in the foreground, a series of symbols had been etched into the pavement. The symbols were a strange mix of historical emblems and what looked like a series of coordinates. He had never seen anything like them. He had a strange, unsettling feeling as he began to investigate. The photograph felt as if it held a deep, forgotten secret. It was a puzzle that felt both ancient and modern, and it pulled him in with a magnetic, dangerous force. He began to spend his nights trying to decipher the symbols. They were not logical. They were almost poetic. He began to see the symbols not as a cipher, but as a kind of language, a series of phrases that seemed to be leading him somewhere. The more he worked, the more the symbols seemed to be hinting at a physical location, an old, forgotten clock tower. Meanwhile, the security analyst was working her way through the mysterious code. It was a different kind of challenge, one that didn't fit into her usual patterns. The code was not logical. It was almost poetic. She began to see the numbers not as a code, but as a kind of language, a series of phrases that seemed to be leading her somewhere. The more she worked, the more the data seemed to be hinting at a physical location, a quiet, unassuming art gallery. A week later, she found herself standing before a large, ornate clock tower, its hands frozen at midnight. Her heart pounded in her chest. It was the address from her code. She saw a small plaque on the door, the Great Watchmaker. She entered the tower, the strange coordinates heavy in her mind. At the same time, he found himself standing before a sleek, modern building. It was the address from his photograph. He saw a small plaque on the door, the gilded frame. The door was slightly ajar, and he could hear the faint, ambient music from within. His heart pounded in his chest. He entered the building, the strange photograph heavy in his hands. They found each other in the middle of a bustling intersection. She having left the clock tower, and he having left the art gallery, their paths, which had been so far apart, had finally converged. They stopped, their eyes meeting across the chaotic street. He saw the woman from the photograph he had found in the tower, the one who was meant to decipher the code. She saw the man from the digital blueprint he had found in her data, the one who was meant to restore the photograph. Their eyes widened in recognition, a silent understanding passing between them. He held out the photograph, its image glowing faintly in the streetlights. She held out a small, encrypted memory card. He looked at the photograph, then at her, and then a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, a silent question in his eyes. He gestured for her to follow him. He led her back to his apartment, a small memory card now in her hand. She stepped into his sanctuary, the scent of old paper and film filling her senses. She placed the memory card on his workbench. He carefully took the photograph from her hands and placed it on the table. With a silent nod, he turned to a small, hidden panel in the wall. The panel clicked open, revealing a small, locked compartment. She carefully inserted the memory card. It fit perfectly, a quiet, perfect click. The compartment opened, revealing a single, small, antique music box. He carefully wound the key. It began to play a slow, beautiful melody, a song that neither of them had ever heard before, yet it felt strangely familiar. She immediately understood. The music was a complex algorithm, a key to a greater mystery. She smiled, a silent response to his creation. She moved to his side and, with a single elegant motion of her finger, she projected a small, beautiful hologram of a perfect, blooming cherry blossom over the music box, a finishing touch to his silent masterpiece. He watched her, a quiet understanding passing between them, a world of unspoken words in a single shared moment. He looked at her, at the quiet, powerful beauty of her mind, and he knew that their paths, though different, were forever intertwined. He sat alone on the rooftop, the city lights a silent sea below him. He wasn't a hero, just a boy with a talent for shadows. His name was Kai, and he was an apprentice to a master thief, a ghost who moved through the night with a silent grace. His current assignment was a simple one: observe. A reclusive heiress, rumored to possess a jewel of impossible beauty, was his target. She lived in a towering skyscraper, a beacon of glass and steel. He watched her from a distance, a figure in a window, a silhouette against the warm glow of her apartment. Her name was Hannah. She spent her days with books, her nights with a telescope pointed at the stars. She was an academic, a stargazer, a quiet soul living a life of profound solitude. The jewel, a legendary crimson star, was said to be a family heirloom passed down through generations. It was her legacy, her burden, and the reason for her isolation. She never left her apartment, and few ever entered. Her world was a tranquil, contained universe, a stark contrast to the chaotic, unpredictable one Kai inhabited. He watched her for weeks, a silent voyeur in the urban jungle. He learned her routine, the rhythm of her life. He saw the way she would smile at a particularly beautiful constellation, the way she would get lost in a book, her brow furrowed in concentration. A strange fascination began to grow within him, a feeling he couldn't name. It was more than professional curiosity. It was a quiet, gentle pull. He wasn't just observing a target anymore. He was observing a person. One night, the rhythm of her life was broken. The power went out in her building, plunging her apartment into darkness. He saw her panic, a flicker of fear in the sudden blackness. Without thinking, he moved. He used his training, his mastery of the shadows, to scale the building, a silent specter climbing a glass mountain. He reached her balcony and found her there, wrapped in a blanket, shivering. He saw her eyes, wide and scared, reflecting the distant city lights. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, a silent presence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, battery-powered lantern. The soft light filled the space between them, illuminating her face, her tear-stained cheeks. She looked at him, a complete stranger, with a mix of fear and confusion. He simply nodded, a small, reassuring gesture. She didn't scream, didn't call for help. She just looked at him, a silent question in her eyes. He sat down on the balcony floor, a quiet guardian in the dark. She followed suit, her shivering slowly subsiding. They sat in silence, two souls in the quiet darkness, the lantern, a small sun between them. The power returned an hour later. The lights flickered on, and the spell was broken. She looked at him, her expression a mix of gratitude and wonder. He stood up, his work done. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible bow, and then melted back into the shadows, a ghost once more. He didn't return to his observation post. He couldn't. His mission, his purpose had changed. The jewel, the legendary crimson star, was no longer his focus. She was. He started leaving things for her. A single, perfect origami crane on her balcony railing, a small, handcrafted wooden star on her doorstep. He would watch from a distance as she discovered them, her face a mixture of surprise and delight. He was a secret admirer, a silent protector. He wasn't trying to steal her heart. He was simply trying to bring a little light into her solitary world. He was a thief who had found something more valuable than any jewel, a connection. She, in turn, began to leave things for him. A small slice of cake on her balcony, a single pressed flower, a drawing of a constellation she had been studying. She didn't know who he was, but she knew he was there. She felt his presence, a comforting warmth in her isolated existence. It was a silent conversation, a secret language spoken in gifts and gestures. A romance blossomed in the silence, in the small, significant acts of kindness. One night, the tension in the city changed. He felt it, a premonition, a cold dread. Another thief, a rival, was in the city. A dangerous one, known for his brutality and his ruthless efficiency. His name was Cage, Shadow in their world, and he too was after the Crimson Star. He moved faster than Kai, leaving a trail of broken safes and empty display cases. The silence of the night was replaced by a tense, nervous energy. Kai knew he had to act. He couldn't just observe anymore. He had to protect her, protect the one thing he had come to cherish. He moved on his own, a rogue agent in the thieving world. He used his knowledge of the city's underbelly, his network of informants, to track Cash. He followed the trail of his robberies, the pattern of his movements, a hunter tracking a predator. He was no longer just an apprentice. He was a guardian. The lines between right and wrong, between his world and hers, had blurred. He was willing to risk everything for her. He arrived at her building just as Cage did. The other thief was a blur of motion, a dark figure moving with a predatory grace. Cage had found a way into the building, a vulnerability in the security system. He was inside, heading for her apartment. Kai scaled the building, his movements a desperate, hurried dance. He reached her balcony just as Cage was about to break through the glass door. He didn't fight with brute force. He fought with wit, with misdirection. He used his knowledge of the shadows, his mastery of stealth, to disorient Cage. He created distractions, made noises in the dark, a phantom in the night. He was a silent storm, a whirlwind of motion. Cage, frustrated and confused, lashed out, his rage a tangible thing. Kai dodged, weaved, a matador facing a bull. The conflict was silent, a ballet of two ghosts in the dark. Cage finally cornered him on the balcony, his face a mask of furious contempt. He raised a hand, a sharp metallic tool glinting in the moonlight. Kai, knowing he couldn't win a direct confrontation, made one final move. He threw a handful of glittering dust, a distraction, an illusion he had learned from his master. Cage, startled, stumbled, his foot catching on the railing. He lost his balance and fell, a silent, terrible drop into the night. Kai stood on the balcony, his chest heaving, his body trembling. He looked at the shattered glass door, at the quiet, terrified figure inside. Hana was standing there, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. She had seen it all. She had seen the silent battle, the fall. She knew who he was now. He was the silent guardian, the ghost who had been watching her. He was the one who had been leaving her gifts, and he was a thief. He looked at her, his heart in his throat. He saw the fear, the confusion, the betrayal in her eyes. He knew he had to leave. He couldn't stay. He was from a different world, a dangerous world, and he had no place in hers. He turned to go, to melt back into the shadows, a broken ghost, but then he felt a touch. A hand, small and warm, on his arm. He stopped, his body frozen. He turned to look at her. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The fear was gone, replaced by a deep, profound understanding. She didn't see a thief. She saw the boy who had brought her light in the dark. She saw the silent guardian who had protected her. She saw the one who had left her a wooden star and an origami crane. She didn't speak. She simply took his hand, her fingers lacing with his. She led him inside, into the warmth of her apartment. She didn't ask him who he was or what he was. She didn't care about the jewels or the secrets. She just looked at him, her eyes filled with a love that transcended words, a connection that had been forged in silence and shadow. He looked at her, at the woman who had seen past his darkness and found his light. He was a thief who had finally stolen something he couldn't give back, his own heart. And he knew, with a certainty that was as bright as the stars she loved, that he was home.